Have you ever heard a metaphor that's just so confident, so powerful, that it actually convinces everybody of a total lie? Well, the leaders of ancient Jerusalem had one, and believe it or not, it was all about a cooking pot. Yeah, a cauldron. So let's dive right into this really strange and chilling prophecy from Ezekiel chapter 11.
So this, right here, this was basically the slogan of Jerusalem's elite. And on the surface, I know, it sounds pretty weird, maybe even a little grim, but for them, this was a declaration of absolute security.
And that really is the core question we're going to dig into today. How did this simple metaphor for safety get completely twisted by God into this terrifying prophecy of doom? It's just a masterclass in divine irony.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the vision at the gate. Then, we'll get into what the leaders meant by their whole cauldron thing. After that, we'll see how God flips that metaphor on its head with the flesh of the slain. And finally, we'll look at the judgment that happened outside the pot.
All right, first up, a vision at the gate. Let's really set the scene here, because the prophet Ezekiel is about to get a front-row seat to some serious spiritual corruption right at the heart of Jerusalem.
So right in verse 1, the Spirit just whisks Ezekiel away in a vision and drops him at the east gate of the temple. Now, the location here is absolutely key. This isn't just any gate. This is the exact spot where Ezekiel had already seen God's own glory leaving the temple. So it's a place loaded with spiritual meaning. And who does he see hanging out there? 25 men, the so-called princes of the people, basically the city's ruling class.
And verse 2, wow, it gets right to the point. No beating around the bush. God calls out two of them by name, Jazaniah and Pelatiah, and then gives this absolutely damning assessment. He says, These are the men that devise mischief and give wicked counsel in this city. We're not talking about just poor leadership here. This is active, malicious deception.
And that leads us straight to the core of their wicked counsel. This is where they unveil their masterful piece of propaganda, the whole cauldron metaphor. So in verse 3, they just lay it all out. Here's their logic. To them, Jerusalem's thick, strong walls are the cauldron, the cooking pot. The Babylonian army surrounding the city, that's the fire outside. And they, the city's elite, well, they're the prime cuts of meat, the flesh, tucked safely inside, totally protected from the flames. Talk about a metaphor of complete invulnerability and pure arrogance.
And what's so crucial to understand is that this wasn't just some private belief they held. Oh no. They were broadcasting this message of false security to the entire city. They were telling people, hey, judgment is not near. Go on, keep building your houses. Don't listen to those doom and gloom prophets like Jeremiah or Ezekiel. You are perfectly safe right here in the pot. They were basically hardening the people against the very warnings that were meant to save them.
But God is about to take their clever little metaphor and turn it into a horrifying mirror. Right in verse 4, he commands Ezekiel, prophesy against them, prophesy, O son of man. And what comes next is just a devastating correction.
And this is where we see God's response, right in verse 7. It's like he says, oh, you want to talk about a cauldron? Okay, let's talk about it. He actually agrees. Yeah, the city is a cauldron. But then he completely redefines what the flesh is. It's not you, the living leaders. It's the dead. It's the victims of your own corruption and your failed policies.
Look at this stark contrast. The leaders sold this lie. The city is a pot of protection for them. But God reveals the truth. The city is a pot of death, and it's filled with the bodies of the very people they failed. He doesn't just disagree with their metaphor. He hijacks it and makes it way more literal and gruesome than they ever could have imagined.
So who exactly are these slain people? Well, verse 6 says the leaders had multiplied their slain in this city. And this really means two things. First, you've got the victims of their corrupt justice system. We're talking about people who are basically murdered under the color of law. And second, it's all the citizens who died because these leaders stubbornly convinced them to fight a hopeless war against Babylon, filling the streets with bodies.
Okay, so if the slain victims are the flesh inside the pot, that leaves a big question. What happens to the leaders who thought they were so safe? Well, God's judgment is incredibly specific, and it all happens outside the pot.
So from verses 8 through 10, God just systematically dismantles their entire fantasy. You thought you were safe inside? Nope. He says, I will bring you forth out of the midst of it. You were afraid of the Babylonian sword outside? Well, I will bring a sword upon you. You thought you were in control? Guess again.
I will deliver you into the hands of strangers. And what about your ultimate safe space, Jerusalem? Not a chance. I will judge you in the border of Israel. You see? Every single element of their false security is precisely perfectly reversed.
Then verse 11 delivers the final, undeniable verdict. There is zero room for misunderstanding here. God states it explicitly. This city shall not be your cauldron. Just like that, their metaphor is officially canceled. The very thing that was their source of pride has now become the symbol of their condemnation.
And you know what? This isn't just some powerful poetry. This actually happened. The book of 2 Kings tells us that after Jerusalem finally fell, King Zedekiah and his princes were captured trying to escape. And where were they taken? To a place called Riblah, which is right on the northern border of Israel, where they were executed by the Babylonians. The judgment was fulfilled, not just in theory, but literally, geographically.
So why? Why go through all this elaborate, terrifying judgment? Well, verses 10 and 12 repeat the ultimate reason. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about revelation. Everything that happened, all of it, was so that they and everyone watching shall know that I am the Lord. It was a powerful, unmistakable demonstration of sovereign authority against leaders who had tried to set themselves up in God's place.
And that really leaves us with a challenging thought, doesn't it? The story of Jerusalem's cauldron is ancient history, but the human impulse behind it feels very, very modern. It really makes you wonder, what are the cauldrons we build for ourselves today? What are the stories we tell, the systems we trust in that give us a false sense of security, all just to shield us from a difficult truth we would much rather not face?